Since the end of World War II, the United States has been involved in a series of conflicts that span continents and decades. World War II itself was the deadliest conflict in American history, with more than 405,000 U.S. military personnel killed. But after 1945, the scale and nature of warfare changed, and so did the number of U.S. military fatalities. In the early years of the Cold War, the Korean War erupted in 1950 as North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel into South Korea. Responding under the auspices of the United Nations, the United States committed large ground forces to the peninsula. Between 1950 and 1953, approximately 36,574 U.S. servicemen and women lost their lives. This figure includes both battle deaths and other deaths that occurred in theater, reflecting the brutal conditions and fierce combat that defined the conflict in rugged Korean terrain. Shortly after Korea, another protracted conflict drew in American forces, the Vietnam War. While U.S. involvement in Vietnam began earlier in an advisory role, the major period of combat that most Americans associate with the war is from the mid-1960s through the early 1970s. U.S. military personnel operated in dense jungles and ambush-prone environments, facing an enemy skilled in guerrilla tactics as well as conventional engagements. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., lists more than 58,000 names of U.S. military personnel who died as a result of their service in Vietnam. These deaths represent the highest toll in any U.S. conflict after World War II and underscore the human cost of a war that deeply divided American society while reshaping U.S. foreign policy and military strategy. After Vietnam, the next major conflict in which the United States engaged that resulted in significant fatalities was the Gulf War of 1990 to 1991. Triggered by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, U.S. forces led a broad coalition to liberate the occupied territory in an operation known as Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Thanks to overwhelming air superiority, rapid maneuver warfare, and a relatively brief ground campaign, the number of U.S. servicemen and women killed was comparatively low. Official statistics record around 258 U.S. military deaths associated with the Gulf War. This sharp decrease in fatalities, compared with earlier wars, reflected not only the shorter duration of the conflict, but also advances in military technology, medical care, and battlefield evacuation. The most prolonged and complex set of conflicts involving U.S. forces since World War II falls under what is often referred to as the War on Terror. Triggered by the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, this broad campaign included major operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as related missions in various other countries. In Afghanistan, U.S. troops were first sent in late 2001 as part of Operation Enduring Freedom to dismantle the Taliban regime that had harbored al-Qaeda terrorists. Over nearly 2 decades of war, U.S. military forces operated in rugged terrain and faced a resilient insurgency. According to official U.S. Department of Defense casualty reports, the total number of U.S. servicemen and women killed in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021 was approximately 2,459. This figure includes those killed in hostile action, as well as certain non-hostile deaths in the theater of operations, and reflects the dangers inherent in long-term counterinsurgency warfare. In Iraq, major U.S. combat operations began in 2003 with the invasion to overthrow Saddam Hussein's government, followed by extended stability operations and counterinsurgency fighting in subsequent years. While estimates vary somewhat based on the source and how different operations are classified, Department of Defense data and related casualty tracking indicate that thousands of U.S. military personnel were killed during the Iraq War. One widely cited total places U.S. military deaths in Iraq at nearly 5,000 over the course of the conflict's major phases. When combined with the deaths in Afghanistan, the total number of U.S. servicemen and women who died in the War on Terror, excluding more peripheral operations, approaches and exceeds 7,000. When these figures from Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and the War on Terror are combined, the total number of U.S. military personnel who have died in conflict-associated service since the end of World War II is just over 101,000. This total does not include lesser-known operations or deployments where fatalities numbered in the dozens rather than the thousands, such as the interventions in Grenada and Panama, but it does encompass the major wars that defined American military engagement over the past 8 decades. These numbers, while stark on their own, tell only part of the story. Beyond the raw statistics are the individual lives and families forever altered by the loss of a service member. For many veterans and their loved ones, the impact of a death in service reverberates across generations, shaping not only personal histories, but national consciousness as well. The way these deaths are remembered, through memorials, commemorations, and educational efforts, reflects a broader societal reckoning with the costs of war, both in terms of human life and in the emotional and psychological toll on those who serve. Understanding how these numbers fit into the wider arc of American military history also requires context. In comparison to World War II, when U.S. military fatalities exceeded 400,000, post-1945 conflicts have resulted in far fewer deaths for American service members, even as they have spanned longer durations and presented complex strategic challenges. The shift reflects changes in military technology, doctrine, and geopolitical strategy, but it does not diminish the sacrifice represented by each life lost. The legacy of these conflicts continues to shape public debate about when and how the United States engages its military forces abroad. Questions about national interests, the efficacy of military intervention, and the responsibilities owed to veterans and their families remain central to political and cultural discussions. The deaths of U.S. servicemen and women are often invoked in arguments both for and against future engagements, demonstrating how the memory of those who have given their lives remains deeply intertwined with decisions about war and peace. In the end, the story of U.S. military fatalities since World War II is both a numerical account and a human narrative. While an aggregate number such as 101,000 serves as a stark metric of the human cost of conflict, it is the individual stories of courage, loss, and service that provide the deeper meaning behind these statistics. As new generations of Americans reflect on the nation's history and its role in the world, the memory of those who sacrificed their lives in Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other theaters will continue to inform our understanding of service, sacrifice, and the enduring impacts of war.